So we're talking about this whole concept of is that a little loud? Maybe it's just, no, it's okay. Anybody getting blown out in the back? It's all right so far? Okay, good. We're talking about this whole concept of relationship. What does it mean to have a relationship with God? It's hard to draw the comparisons, as I was just trying to express to him. We draw comparisons based on our own experiences here, right? And on relationships that we have here. But we bring a lot of the baggage of those relationships with us to this scenario, and sometimes it's hard to bring that baggage and to make it compare with what God is trying to establish in our lives. Today we're talking about knocking at the door. And there's a real familiar verse that we're going to look at in just a couple minutes. But I remember a time when I was youth pastoring in Cambridge, a kind of a large church there. We had a youth event on a Friday or Saturday night. I don't remember which it was, but in the middle of the youth event, we had around 100, 105, 110 kids there. And I don't know how this happened, but it struck me that two of them were missing. It was a relatively newly formed couple, and they had somehow managed to disappear from the goings-on that the rest of the group was doing. We were in the gymnasium area, and there was another big room. And so I realized they weren't either in the gymnasium or the big room. So I went on a little bit of a search to find this recently infatuated young couple. And I remember going around, and I decided not to turn lights on. I didn't want to give myself away entirely because I wanted to find them. And I went through the downstairs, nothing. Finally got upstairs. I'm going around, getting toward the nursery, the children's play area, and I see shadows through the door. And so it's like, I think perhaps I've found them. Well, I think they saw a shadow of me or something at the same time, because those shadows stopped moving, but they dove under a little children's play tent that was set up in the room. And so as I'm looking through the window of this, and they were maybe 2 feet away, and there's this little tent with 4 feet sticking out from the tent. They were much better at escaping than they were at hiding. But anyway, I remember, so I said, well, I'm going to give them a chance here. So I kind of knocked quietly on because the door was locked, of course. So I knocked on the door, and nothing. And I'm watching the feet, and they're nervously moving, but not moving much, and I could just imagine the conversation going on in there, like, we're in trouble, So I knocked away, knocked a little louder, realized they weren't going to move. So I went back down, got my key that opened all the area rooms, came back up, and when I got there, I kind of thought maybe they would have taken that opportunity to escape. They were still icicled right there, and so I knocked again to give them one more opportunity to let me in, and no, they still wouldn't answer. So I had to use the key and then threaten them with their lives, basically. But most of us know, don't we, what it's like to knock on someone's door and to not get an answer. We're pretty sure they're there. We might have seen a shadow dash through a part of the house. Maybe in our place, if the dogs aren't crated, that's an indication that there's probably somebody there. And but we all know what it's like. If I were to knock on that door right now, we would assume, if there's no answer, we would assume one of a couple things, right? One, there's probably nobody in there, and I kind of hope there's not, because that would get dark and uncomfortable pretty quick. But if it were a typical door, we would assume that if there's no response, there's either nobody there, they're really engaged in something, they don't want to be disturbed, or they'd rather just not answer the door, right? And we have that experience. Most of us have had that. Many of us know, too, what it's like to have someone knock on your door and not really want to answer the door, right? For whatever reason. Maybe we saw them coming. I remember where I've worked in the past, they would sometimes put 2 doors, in your office so that you could have one that could let people in that you wanted to come in, and one that you could escape out of if you wanted to be invisible when certain people showed up. Well, the Bible gives us a picture of this exact type scenario. As in the book of Revelation, it talks about Jesus actually standing at the door. And what he's doing, he's not just standing at the door, he's knocking continuously at the door, and he's even yelling. Okay, his voice is elevated in this verse. He's trying to get our attention so that we'll let him in. The interesting thing about this passage is that it was written to a bunch of church people who were so wealthy, who were so blessed and so busy doing lots of good stuff. They were busy doing lots of good, even church things, that they didn't even realize that Jesus was standing at the door of their hearts, knocking away, elevating his voice, trying to get their attention so that they would let him in. And even though they were doing all this good church stuff, Jesus, who was really the central figure of everything they were doing anyway, wasn't even involved in the things that they were doing. Well, here's the verse, and some of us might have memorized it at some point in time. And the way I memorized it back when I was a kid, it started with the word behold. Great word, eh? Behold is actually, that's something that would be said to someone whose attention you were trying to get. That would be the yelling reference of this, where you've elevated your voice to try to get somebody's attention. It's from Revelation 3, and the verse says, behold, or your translation may say, look. And I'll tell you where it is in just a second, but I don't want us all to go there. Behold, or look, I stand at the door and knock. If you hear my voice and open the door, I will... Now, wait a second. If you were going to finish that verse, if some of you know how that verse goes from that point on, some of us maybe aren't as familiar with that verse, but if you didn't know the next part of that sentence, how would you finish that sentence? Jesus is standing at the door of our hearts, of our lives, knocking, trying to get our attention so that we will let him in. And he says, behold, or look, I'm standing at the door and I'm knocking. If you hear my voice and if you open the door, I will... Now, how would you finish that? I would probably assume that he wants to come in and point out all the garbage. I'll come in and point out everything that stinks about your life. I'll come in and work on your attitude. I'll come in and talk to you about some habits that you have. I'm going to come in and talk to you about some priorities that are way off base. See, that's kind of how I would finish that verse. How would you have answered that verse if you're a young adult or an adult here? How would you have answered that at 16? Jesus is knocking at your door. Behold, if you hear my voice, I'm going to come in and I will. How would you have answered that as a 16-year-old? Oh man, he's going to want me to stop doing everything that's fun. He's going to want to come in and point out all this stuff and tell me to read my Bible all day, every day, and I should probably sit in the church half the time to do it. You know, that's kind of the picture I had of what he would want to come in and say, because at the age of 16, I wasn't even sure that heaven was going to be all that it was cracked up to be, because on one hot July night at the church camp that I went to every summer, after what I thought was just horrific music, the evangelist got up and said, that's just a taste of what heaven's going to be. And I'm going, oh. I remember sitting there going, oh, say it ain't so. I can't, I can't bear that for eternity of that warbly voice. Now, I'm not saying any names because I don't want to incriminate myself, basically, but, please tell me that's not true. But that's how I would have finished that verse. If anyone hears my voice and actually opens the door, I'll come in and I'll rearrange your life because your life's pretty messed up. Or, I'll have a long talk with you about how long you left me standing outside the door knocking. Maybe that's what he would want to say. We need to talk. But what does Jesus say? Because this gives us a picture of where we're going through this series. It's Revelation chapter 20. Where am I? Yeah, there we go. I'm jumping to the next one already. Revelation 3.
That's the cry of our hearts, Lord. We want to be just like you.